Ladies and gentlemen, the Harmony Tour Chorus from Portadown, County Armagh in Northern Ireland.
Mr. President, Mrs. Clinton, Taoiseach, Ms. Larkin, I just want to read a few snippets of this memoir about growing up in Limerick. This memoir has just recently been translated into Croatian. And this week I signed a contract for Turkey. Limerick doesn't know what's happening to it. Bands of Croatian and Turkish tourists all over the city. And there are many people in Limerick don't like what I said about them, but the tills are ringing. So these are snippets about 3 different subjects. One about school, one about religion, which if you're Irish you can't get away from, and what about my first job. This is about the teachers at Leamy's National School, which is the school I went to in Limerick. The National School was the lowest in the hierarchy of schools. Above that was the Christian Brothers, then the Jesuits. But when you went to national school, you knew that by 14 you were finished. And you'd go off to become a messenger boy or something. And I always said that over the door of Leamy's, they should have painted the legend, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here." And when I became a teacher in New York City in high schools, I didn't have any models for teaching except the schoolmasters in Limerick. And this is what they were like. There are 7 masters in Leamy's National School, and they all have leather straps, canes, black thorn sticks. They hit you with the sticks on the shoulders, the back, the legs, and especially the hands. If they hit you on the hands, it's called a slap. They hit you if you're late, if you have a leaky nib in your pen, if you laugh, if you talk, and if you don't know things. They hit you if you don't know why God made the world, if you don't know the patron saint of Limerick, if you can't recite the Apostles' Creed, if you can't add 19 to 47, if you can't subtract 19 from 47, if you don't know the chief towns and products of the 32 counties of Ireland, if you can't find Bulgaria on the wall map of the world that's blotted with spit, snot, and blobs of ink thrown by angry pupils expelled forever. They hit you if you can't say your name in Irish, if you can't say the Hail Mary in Irish, if you can't ask for the lavatory pass in Irish. It helps to listen to the big boys ahead of you. They can tell you about the master you have now, what he likes and what he hates. One master will hit you if you don't know that Eamon de Valera is the greatest man that ever lived. Another master will hit you if you don't know that Michael Collins was the greatest man that ever lived. Mr. Benson hates America, and you have to remember to hate America, or he'll hit you. Mr. O'D hates England, and you have to remember to hate England, or he'll hit you. If you ever say anything good about Oliver Cromwell, they'll all hit you. When I was 10 years old, and around the time I made my confirmation, I contacted typhoid fever, and that was before the age of miracle drugs. So it took 3.5 months in the hospital to cure me. So it was during the summer. I went in the end of June. I was at July, August, September. What could be more bitter than that? If you're going to get typhoid fever, get it in the wintertime so you'll miss school. But I went in the summer, and then I came home, and my mother took me back to school, and the teacher said I had been in the 5th grade, and they want to keep me there. They were not going to let me go on to the 6th grade because of all the time I missed. And I begged, I went down to the Franciscan church and begged St. Francis of Assisi to get me out of that class because my brother Maliki was there and I didn't want to be in the same class as him. But they made me stay in that class. Now I have to sit in Mr. O'D's class listening to the catechism and all the stuff he taught us last year. I'd like to raise my hand and give the answer, but he says, "Be quiet, let your brother answer." He gives them tests in arithmetic and makes me sit there and correct them. He dictates to them in Irish and makes me correct what they've written. Then he gives me special compositions to write and makes me read them to the class because of all I learned from him last year. He tells the class, "Frank McCourt is going to show you how well he learned to write in this class last year. He's going to write a composition on our Lord, aren't you, McCourt? He's going to tell us what it would be like if our Lord had grown up in Limerick, which has the arch confraternity of the Holy Family and is the holiest city in Ireland. We know that if our Lord had grown up in Limerick, he'd never have been crucified because the people of Limerick were always good Catholics and not given to crucifixion. So, McCourt, you have to go home and write that composition and bring it in tomorrow." My father says Mr. O'D has a great imagination, but didn't our Lord suffer enough on the cross without sticking him in Limerick on top of it? The next day, Mr. O'D says, "All right, McCourt, read your composition to the class." The name of my composition is... The title, McCourt, the title. The title of my composition is Jesus and the Weather. What? Jesus and the Weather. All right, read it. This is my composition. I don't think Jesus, who is our Lord, would have liked the weather in Limerick, because it's always raining and the Shannon keeps the whole city damp. When you look at pictures of Jesus, he's always wandering around ancient Israel in a sheet. It never rains there, and you never hear of anyone coughing or getting consumption or anything like that. And no one has a job there, because all they do is stand around and eat manna and shake their fists and go to crucifixions. Anytime Jesus got hungry, all he had to do was walk up the road to a fig tree or an orange tree and have his fill. If he wanted a pint, he could wave his hand over a big glass and there was the pint. Or he could visit Mary Magdalene and her sister, Martha. And they'd give him his dinner, no questions asked. And he'd get his feet washed and dried with Mary Magdalene's hair, while Martha washed the dishes, which I don't think is fair. Why should she have to wash the dishes while her sister sits out there chatting away with our Lord? It's a good thing Jesus decided to be born Jewish in that warm place, because if he was born in Limerick, he'd catch the consumption and be dead in a month. And there wouldn't be any Catholic church, and there wouldn't be any communion or confirmation, and we wouldn't have to learn the catechism and write compositions about him, the end. Mr. ID is quiet. Gives me a strange look, and I'm worried, because when he's quiet like that, it means someone is going to suffer. He says, McCourt, who wrote that composition? I did, sir. Did your father write that composition? He didn't, sir. Come here, McCourt. I followed him out the door along the hall to the headmaster's room. Mr. O'D shows him my composition, and Mr. O'Halloran gives me this strange look. Did you write this composition? I did, sir. I'm taken out of the 5th class and put into Mr. O'Halloran's 6th class with all the boys I know. And when school is over that day, I have to go back down to the statue of St. Francis of Assisi to thank him, even if my legs are still weak from the typhoid. And I wonder, was it something good I said in that composition, or something bad? Then when I left Gleamy's National School at 14, I had to get a job, and the first job was in the post office, delivering telegrams. This is a short saying from a day in the post office.
I'm from a place called County Tyrone, up in the northern part of Ireland. I'll tell me ma when I go home, the boys won't leave the girls alone. Pull my hair, stole my comb, but that's all right till I go home. She is handsome, she is pretty, she is the belle of Belfast City. She is courting 1, 2, 3, please will you tell me who is she? That's a children's skipping song from Belfast. And I got to thinking lately that a lot of the children in our part of the world, they're skipping and they're dancing and they're games have been performed for far too long, I think, under a sort of a shadow. And God willing, and with all our prayers, that shadow may lift very, very soon. They can play their games normally. I also remember very fondly when President Clinton and the First Lady made their very historic visit to our northern province. It engendered great joy among us. It also engendered great hope. And I have tried to encompass some of the hope in a song I've written for the children of Northern Ireland, no matter where they come from. This song is called Anthem for the Children. Since you've asked me what I'd like to have for Ireland, I'll tell you just as simply as I can. An easy heart for every Irish mother, and a decent, honest job for every man. I would like to see her smile with peace and justice, and every child to learn of liberty. And I'd like to take my brothers and my sisters home again, and never have to work across the sea. And this is what I'd like to have for Ireland, the country that has made us what we are, to breathe the air of freedom in her mountains and her streets, and give our children peace instead of war. Since you've asked me what I'd like to have for Ireland, what I have to say is simple, short and plain. Irishmen to think and act as brothers, and love to take the place of hate and pain. I would have the Belfast man walk down to Galway, and everyone he'd meet to take his hand. And I'd have the Cork man wander up through Derry on the Foyle, and feel that he is in his native land. And this is what I'd like to have for Ireland, the country that has made us what we are, to breathe the air of freedom in her mountains and her streets, and give our children peace instead of war. And since you've asked me what I'd like to have for Ireland, to tell the truth, the thing I'd like the best is Irishmen all looking to the future, and bygones would be bygones laid to rest. Let tomorrow be the time for laughing children. May they grow in love and friendship day by day, and may their understanding of each other bring us hope that in Ireland we can find a better way. And this is what I'd like to have for Ireland, the country that has made us what we are, to breathe the air of freedom in her mountains and her streets, and give our children peace instead of war. To breathe the air of freedom in her mountains and her streets, and give our children peace instead of war.
Thank you so much, and I want to formally, on behalf of the President and myself, welcome all of you here this evening. As you can tell, the crowd grew as this event became better and better known, and we weren't able to provide chairs for all of you, for which I apologize, but we're delighted to have you all here with us for one of the favorite nights of our years here in the White House. There are so many people here whom I would wish to recognize, but will choose not to at risk of leaving anyone out. We are so honored to have the Taoiseach and Ms. Larkin here with us this evening, and hope that all of you have had a chance, both before the entertainment and hopefully after, to meet each other, to visit, and to talk, and to stay as long as you would like. I want to thank all of the entertainers who were here this evening, some of whom were playing for your enjoyment while others of you were in the receiving line, and particularly all who have just performed for us. I know that there are many strong feelings and emotions about all that is going on and the hope that people feel in their hearts. And I want just to add a personal note. I don't think I've ever been more moved or enjoyed any time more than the times that I have been in Ireland and Northern Ireland. The visit that I made with my husband was one of the great highlights of our lives personally, and certainly one of the great moments of his presidency. I was very privileged to return again to Dublin and Belfast in November, and to meet with a number of people, but particularly in Belfast, with women and young people. We saw representatives of those young people here performing a few minutes ago. And I just want to say a special word of appreciation to all the women in Ireland and Northern Ireland who have worked for peace and worked to bring about reconciliation over so many years. And certainly there isn't any greater motivation than the faces of the young people that we see here with us this evening, and the faces that we carry with us, those of us who have seen them firsthand and heard their dreams and aspirations, as I was privileged to do at a youth conference in Belfast. So it is a great honor for us to have you here with us this evening. And there isn't anyone who looks forward to this day more than my husband. He said, the last word he said to me, because, you know, he was meeting all the way up, in fact, past the time when we were supposed to start the receiving line, and he rushed back from the Oval Office, changed his shirt, came rushing downstairs, and so he hasn't had anything to eat. And so the last thing he said as I was getting up, I thought it would be one of those profound words of advice about something I might say. Instead, he said, "This looks like great food. Can we get some upstairs?" So please join me in welcoming the President of the United States.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, every time Al Gore has a crowd like this, he always says, "Thank you for the standing ovation." Taoiseach, Ms. Larkin, to all of our guests, all the ambassadors here, all the members of Congress, our distinguished guests from the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, and all across the United States. There are so many Americans here who love Ireland and long for peace. I hesitate to mention any, but I must mention two. First, I would like to thank our distinguished ambassador who's just announced her resignation a few months hence, Jean Kennedy Smith. Thank you, ma'am, for everything you've done. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I have to thank one other person who is in his present position, because on one late, very sad night in 1994, my legendary powers of persuasion fell flat, and I was unable to persuade George Mitchell to run for re-election. He is still trying to determine whether, as a consequence, I bestowed upon him a blessing or a curse. I always tell him it is, after all, in his hands. Thank you, Senator Mitchell, for what you are doing. I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you. In his inaugural address, President Kennedy proposed a new approach to the Cold War when he said, "Let both sides explore what problems unite us instead of belaboring those which divide us." He eloquently insisted, civility is not a sign of weakness. If that was true for two great, distant, often alien superpowers like the United States and the Soviet Union, surely it is true for neighbors in Ireland. Tonight we have here in this room representatives, leaders of all the parties to the peace talks. It is a great night. I was thinking in sort of my impish way that I almost wish I could give them a perfectly harmless 3-day cold, which would require them all to be quarantined in the green room. It's it's not a very big room, the green room, and we have a lot of parties to the talks. So in just 3 days of getting over a cold together, I think all these problems would be solved. Well, the peace talks won't be that easy. But all of you, you have to seize this historic moment. Just think, in just a few weeks, you could lift this enormous burden from the shoulders of all the children of Ireland. It has been said that St. Patrick's Day is the day when the entire world wishes it were Irish. Well, when lasting peace finally comes, the entire world will rejoice. When I heard the wonderful songs up here, and Frank's wonderful reading, and all the eloquence of Irish passion and pain and joy came flooding out of the performers, young and old, I was reminded of that great line from Yeats, "In dreams begin responsibility." All the Irish are dreamers. In the next few weeks, if Irish responsibility measures up to Irish dreams, this next year's celebration here will be the greatest in the history of this great house. God bless you.
We are so privileged to have with us the Taoiseach, and he gave me a wonderful reception at Dublin Castle, which I will never forget, which included dining with Frank McCourt, who was just as eloquent at dinner as he was this evening. So please join me in welcoming Bertie Ahern.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Clinton. President, thank you for the warm Irish welcome that you've extended to us all this evening. We much appreciate that. Your practice that you have built up, which we say now is a very old tradition, because anything that happens twice in Ireland is an old tradition. But you've been honouring St. Patrick's Day by hosting this wonderful event. It's a gesture, we believe, of recognition, which we in Ireland deeply appreciate. I'm not too sure of the wisdom of Mrs. Clinton stating that we can stay as long as we like. Most Irish people, President, that came to the United States came for a short period. But we really do appreciate your kindness and the kindness you've shown us all over the last few days. I know in previous years on this occasion, people have tried to claim ownership of this particular house because it was designed by James Hoban. Well, I'm not going to do that. because I don't really like Kilkenny that much anyway. That's where he was from. For all of you Irish people here, my county have been trying to beat Kilkenny for about 100 years in hurling, and we've never. So we move away from James Hoban. But can I say, at a deeper level, I think James Hoban symbolises the contribution which emigrants from Ireland of both traditions made to the development of this great country. And they and their descendants are still playing a vital role in the economic and the political and the cultural life of the United States. And the President has been kind to say that so many times on so many occasions. And this year, of course, we commemorate the bicentenary of the 1798 rebellion in Ireland. And the ideals of the United Irishmen were based on the most rational and progressive and inclusive thinking of the time. And they drew on the spirit of enlightenment and the constitutional theory of the founding fathers of the United States. And the tragedy, of course, was that in some instances their idealism, which was great, could not prevent occasions of sectarian violence. And quite a lot of vision and the leadership of the United Irishmen, President, came from Ulster, and especially from the Presbyterian tradition, with its enlightened emphasis on justice, equality, liberty and tolerance. And in the White House this evening, as the President has said, they're distinguished political representatives of the same traditions who were involved in the events of 200 years ago. And they, together with the Irish and British governments, are trying to create a new dispensation, which will create enough of political space to accommodate all the traditions on the island and to refocus all the past ascension. I firmly believe, like you, President, that it can be done. We appreciate your encouragement. We have not missed the pressure and the pushing that you're doing on us. I think that is fair. I think the burden of division and intolerance, which has so wounded our country, and it has, it should not be allowed to continue into a new millennium. We've heard tonight the readings and the music, and we've seen the song and the dance over the last number of days, and we see it all the time now. I'd like to think that Ireland is now a modern, a pluralist, a self-confident country which no longer can tolerate political violence or sectarianism. They should have no place in our lives and no role in our future. And as you said, Mr. President, in Belfast, it must be consigned to the past. And the immediate weeks ahead will be crucial for the political future of Ireland, North and South. And when we all leave here over the next 24 hours or so, we, I think, have to continue the same spirit. We have to continue the same spirit that we leave in when we get back home again. I think, President, never before have the circumstances and the combination of forces been so inclusive to achieving a settlement. And the Irish and British government, Dr. Mo Mowlam, share a common determination to bring this process to a successful conclusion. And the parties themselves, and I want to acknowledge it here, have shown courage, have taken risks, have worked intensely. They've worked hard to make this enterprise work. It enjoys an extraordinary and even-handed and active approach of the President of the United States of America. Support from the administration, which I had the opportunity today, when I was at the lunch given by the Speaker, attended by the President, of the many friends of Ireland in the Congress, many of them that are here again tonight. So the time, friends, is ripe for a settlement. The weeks ahead are going to be challenging. They will require all the parties to show leadership and great courage and be willing to compromise and not be distracted by the normal activities of those from outside the process who will be intent in the weeks ahead of preventing a settlement. We know that, so let us not be surprised. The great prize of peace is so close. We're determined to grasp it. And I want to promise you, Mr. President, that we can make it. We can do it. The people in this room can do it together. We know that we have your support. Can I just say... It would be wrong of me to leave the White House this evening without thanking two people. I want to thank Senator George Mitchell for all that he has done. George, if I can say it in one line, I want to thank you, but I also wanted to thank Heather, your wife, your young son, for all they've allowed us. And I want to be associated with the President's remarks about Jean Kennedy Smith. She has done a tremendous job for us, and she had great achievements, too numerous to mention, but I want to thank her for the time and the commitment that she's afforded me and all my colleagues and successive governments over the last number of years. Mr. President, your trip to Ireland showed you at first hand how deeply Irish people everywhere yearn for peace and to move the burden of conflict lifted from them. I know that that meant a lot to you, and I know that all you've said since has given all of us so much encouragement. I think we want to welcome you back soon, Mr. President, and we want to show that when you do come back, that we have taken all those risks that you've prompted us to do. We feel strongly encouraged by all that you've said. I want to make it possible so that you can come back and that you can say that what you've contributed for us, as you have in so many other parts of the world. Tonight we're being selfish talking about Ireland, but I know the people from many parts of the world could be here to acknowledge all that you've done and all the great ones. We thank you for that. So, friends from Ireland and from the United Kingdom are working together with a common purpose, taking ownership of the agenda for our people. We can, in our own place, can transform the situation. We can free each other from the cages of the past. We can cross the threshold of the new millennium at peace with ourselves and each other. Failure to do that would be a real betrayal of future generations. We cannot do that. Mr. President, the leaders that you have gathered under this roof tonight have the capacity, together, to write one of the most important chapters of the history of our island. Let us now leave here and set about that task.
I feel, we're about to leave. I feel duty-bound because there's so many people from Massachusetts here today. To tell you that in Massachusetts, this is a dual holiday. This is also the day when over 200 years ago, the British left Massachusetts. So it's called Evacuation Day. Now, that means that you must evacuate the White House. I have to say that so State Secretary Mullen doesn't think I made an anti-British slur here. But you needn't leave till 11:59 because it will still be Evacuation Day. Enjoy. We love having you here. Thank you.